I want to talk today about the futility of trying to manage your behavior. We are learning from the great teacher, Jesus of Nazareth, from the great teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, that what is insurmountable are not the problems outside of us or even inside of us. It is that God, His kingdom, His favor, power, love is present and can be guiding your life and my life today. And towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, the section that we're looking at these days is where Jesus makes a very, very sharp and clear decision. Will you follow me? Will that be the most important thing in your life, or will it not? And here's what He says in Matthew 7, verses 15 through 20. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. So, Jesus is making a distinction here that's incredibly important. It is, if you want to think about it this way, a moral theory about human nature. And it was a point of great contention between him and the religious leaders in his days. And we might think about the distinction like this, in this beautifully drawn chart. There is, you have an inside and an outside. I have a friend one time who got divorced, and he said that the judge divided the house up into two halves and gave his wife the inside and him the outside. There's an inside and there's an outside. And the outside are what we might think of in terms of external actions. So these would be particularly words and behaviors and also body language. And then things like writing emails. What do I do with my money? Making financial decisions. If I gossip or if I praise somebody, or my sexual behavior, or running errands, or helping, all the things that we can see in somebody's life. And then there is what Jesus would talk about as the heart. I have a hidden inner life. This is the unseen, and this is where it's so important to recognize a big theme in the Sermon on the Mount has been the reality of the unseen. And of course, that's the realm where God is, your Heavenly Father who is unseen. And this involves things like my thoughts and my desires, my perceptions about things. I might experience in my inner world gratitude or envy or resentment or discontentment, or it's possible to experience love and joy and peace. Now, part of what Jesus is contending for in the Sermon on the Mount is that it is impossible for a life to be transformed if this dimension of life is not changed. I need to be aware of this, and I can't change it on my own, but I can surrender it to God. And becoming a disciple is really a way of putting Jesus in charge of my inner life and aligning it with the kingdom. And so the problem was that he keeps talking about is this tendency, this legalistic, mechanical, superficial tendency that we all have to focus on this. So you have heard that it was said. The old approach that people often would degenerate when it came to taking the laws, don't kill. Killing would be an external action. But Jesus says, but I say to you, don't hold your brother or sister in contempt. Now that's a different kind of heart. You have heard that it was said, don't commit adultery. Just avoid that. That's at the action level. But I say, have the kind of heart where you're not seeking to use another human being for the purpose of illicit sexual gratification. So, then he goes on to say, if this is good, if the inner life is healthy and good and so on, it's going to produce right words and right behaviors and right. Now that doesn't mean there's never any exception. Sometimes you'll have a tree that's quite a good tree and there's a bad apple on it. Sometimes there'll be a tree that's in pretty bad shape but is able to produce a good fruit. Sometimes somebody whose character is generally quite good will do a bad thing, and vice versa. There are, of course, exceptions. And in this world, we very rarely see people whose characters are wholly good or wholly bad. Brief note here, this book by a philosopher, Christian Miller, The Character Gap. You got Gandhi up on top, Hitler down on the bottom. He has done exhaustive research in the field of social psychology, and over again, studies will find that mostly we are influenced by our environment. So folks are ready to do something good if the environment motivates them that way, but they're ready to do something bad. Give shocks to people if an authority tells them if the environment's going that way. Often, particularly secular people, in social psychology will say things like, well, this proves that character is kind of an antiquated Victorian, unreal concept, and that we're all just determined by our environment. Christian Miller says, no, because there's always outliers. There are people, not a lot, but some, where there is a genuinely good character, so it's much harder to get them to do something wrong. And there are some people who have been quite dominated by vice, so they are prepared to do quite awful things. Most of us muddle around in the middle. And Jesus says, now the way that you tell whether somebody has the goods, do they really know God? Are they teaching things that will be helpful to you? Do you want to make them your prophet? Do you want to make them your teacher? Is look at the fruit. Look at their words and their behavior. And although they might be able to disguise it for a little while, they come in sheep's clothing. Over time, their body language, their words will let you know. One of the most striking things the very first time I met Dallas was the real clear sense that although he was not a perfect person at all, I wanted to have the kind of life that he did. He was really, really smart. He used his mind really well, but he never showed off with it. And it's not because he had to bite his tongue all the time. It would have been a painful thing for him to make somebody else feel dumb. And it was quite clear that there just wasn't hurry in his body. In fact, if you were at an event with Dallas when he was done speaking, he would talk to anybody who wanted to talk as long as they wanted to talk. And there would have to be like a Dallas handler to get him from one room to the next. He found people genuinely interesting. So to be a disciple of Jesus is to put him in charge of the tree, the inner life. And Jesus goes on to talk about this a couple of chapters later in Matthew. This is Matthew 12:33. Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good. Or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. And then he goes on, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good person brings good things out of the good stored up in them, and an evil person brings evil things out of the evil stored up in them. And again, right now, most of us are a big mix, but we're headed one direction or another. I tell you, everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every idle word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, by your words you will be condemned. Now, I used to think that meant, don't be involved in unimportant, trivial, idle conversations. What was that? This is a weird association. An old TV show about a talking horse called Mr. Ed, of whom it was said, for Mr. Ed would never speak unless he had something to say. He was apparently an introvert and an internal processor. Jesus' point here is not, avoid casual conversations. It is that it's precisely when I'm not trying hard to manage my words in order to create an impression with you that I reveal the state of my heart. The words that I speak when I'm not particularly trying to look good are the ones that will reveal to others, and maybe to me if I'm paying careful attention, who it is that I really am. So the point here is not try harder to watch your words. Dallas says maybe the primary misconception about spiritual growth, spiritual formation, is that it's a result of trying harder. And maybe the second most prominent illusion about it is that it just comes through grace without any effort at all. You don't have to try at all. I remember Dallas teaching a group one time saying, spiritual formation is an accomplishment. And then he said, I'm trying to make you uncomfortable by using that word. Because there is a role for us to play in it. But of course, we can't manufacture it on our own, and there's no grounds for smugness or self-sufficiency in it. The secret to changing the tree is finding a way to be rooted in the right kind of reality. So Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. It's very interesting in Galatians. He talks about the works of the flesh, but the fruit of the Spirit. The flesh, that's just me, my ego, apart from God, on my own strength, doing what it is that I feel like doing. And then I'll be always operating at the level of actions, because I just want to have what I want to have. But I'll try to disguise my actions so I look better to you than I really am, so that I'll be able to get what I want. There are the works of the flesh, the strained, hidden quality to it. But then there is the fruit of the Spirit. Now, fruit is something that grows organically and naturally. And as I invite God to be with me, then what can emerge in my hidden inner life is love, joy, and peace. So those are the 3 words for today. Today, go beyond behavior modification and action management. Now, obviously, if there's some moment when you're just ready to let anger fly in a hurtful way and it occurs to you, you could not do that and you could bite your tongue. Better to bite your tongue than cut somebody else up with it. But for the focus today, way, way, way beyond anger management. Now, God, could you and I walk through this day together, and could I put you in charge of the inside of the tree? And love, joy, peace. Just each time you say those words and then invite God, God, would you help me to know love and know joy and know peace as your Spirit is directing the inside of my tree? Then we are receiving the new life. Then it's the new birth. Then we're seeking the kingdom. Make it a golden rule day.
If you enjoyed that teaching, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes in this series, Insurmountable, which is all about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. You can also head over to our website, becomenew.com, where we have over 700 10-minute teachings, all dedicated to helping you grow spiritually one day at a time. My name's Tim, and I'm a part of the team here at Become New. Heyo. Just want you to know this is so much more than a YouTube channel. It's really a community of people who are brought together not by our strengths or our ability to achieve, but by our weaknesses and our need for help from God. So we're glad that you're here. If you have a prayer request, there's a group of us who meet each weekday, Monday through Friday, to pray for viewers just like you. So you can send us your request to the number 855-888-0444. We'd love to pray for you. We're glad that you're here. We'll catch you next time.